This is Skip Benton, and welcome to Life After the Family Home, smart conversations about downsizing and planning the next chapter. Today's conversation is about something many homeowners feel the moment they seriously start thinking about a move: overcoming the overwhelm. Because for many people, downsizing sounds reasonable until they start looking around. Then reality hits: closets, cabinets, drawers, bookshelves, the garage, the attic, the spare room, the keepsake boxes, the furniture that has been there for years, the things saved for children, the things inherited from parents, the things that were expensive, the things that might still be useful, the things that carry memories. And suddenly, downsizing does not feel like one project. It feels like 100 emotional decisions waiting in every room. This is something I have seen many times. Not homeowners who are unprepared or careless, quite the opposite. Often, these are people who have built a full life in one home over many years, sometimes decades. And that means the belongings are not random. They are connected to family, work, milestones, holidays, children, parents, and entire chapters of life. That is why the process feels so heavy, because downsizing is rarely just about stuff. It is about memory, identity, responsibility, guilt, fatigue, and the very human feeling that the task may simply be too big to begin. That is where a lot of people get stuck, not because they have made a decision to stay forever, but because the thought of sorting through everything feels exhausting before they even start. And that is exactly why this conversation matters. Because when downsizing feels overwhelming, the answer is usually not to become more aggressive. The answer is to become more realistic. One of the biggest mistakes people make is imagining the entire project at once: the whole house, every closet, every cabinet, every box, every decision. That would overwhelm almost anyone. So the first and most important shift is this: do not treat downsizing like one giant decision. Treat it like a series of small decisions. That changes everything, because the problem is not really the total number of belongings. The problem is the feeling that all of it has to be solved right now. And that is almost never true. Most people do not need a heroic weekend. They need a manageable process. That means smaller categories, smaller time frames, smaller goals, and much smaller expectations at the beginning. If someone has lived in a home for 30 or 40 years, the answer is not to wake up one morning and suddenly handle it all. The better answer is to reduce the size of the task until it feels possible to begin. That may mean starting with one drawer, one cabinet, one shelf, one box, one small corner of one room. That may not sound impressive. Good, because impressive is not the goal. Progress is the goal. And one of the most helpful things homeowners can do is let go of the idea that downsizing needs to feel dramatic in order to count. It does not. Small progress still counts. In fact, small progress is often the only kind that lasts. Another reason downsizing feels overwhelming is that people do not always realize how much decision fatigue is involved. This is not only physical work, it is mental work. Do I keep this? Do I need this? Do I use this? Would I move this? Does anyone in the family want this? Am I keeping this because I love it or because I feel guilty about it? Am I saving this for a reason or just because I have not dealt with it? That is a lot of decision making. And when those decisions pile up, people get tired fast. That is why shorter work sessions often work better than long ones. A focused 20 or 30 minutes can be far more productive than an exhausting all-day attempt that leaves you frustrated, emotional, and ready to avoid the whole process for another month. Pacing matters, especially for older homeowners. This does not need to be a race. It needs to be sustainable. And one thing that helps a lot is separating the project into types of decisions. Not everything has the same emotional weight. That is important. Throwing away expired items in a bathroom cabinet is not the same kind of decision as sorting through family photographs. Letting go of duplicate kitchen tools is not the same as deciding what to do with heirloom furniture. So do not start with the hardest category. That is where many people go wrong. They think the big emotional items should come first. Usually they should not. Start where the decisions are easier. Unused linens, duplicate dishes, old paperwork, extra containers, things clearly broken, items that are no longer used and no longer meaningful. That is where momentum comes from. And momentum matters. because once homeowners see that they can make decisions without everything turning into an emotional event, the process starts to feel more possible. Then the next category gets easier, and the next and the next. Another helpful reminder is this: not everything meaningful needs to stay in the house forever. That can be hard to accept, because after many years in one home, belongings often start to feel like physical proof of a life well lived. The holiday dishes, the old furniture, the children's artwork, the inherited pieces, the saved mementos, the boxes of things connected to family history. And when those items are touched, it can feel like the memories are being disturbed, but memory and object are not the same thing. An item can matter without needing to stay forever. A memory can remain, even if the object does not. A photograph can preserve something. A written story can preserve something. Passing a meaningful item to family can preserve something. And sometimes keeping one item from a chapter is enough rather than keeping 20. That distinction matters because one reason homeowners get overwhelmed is that everything starts feeling equally sacred. And when everything feels sacred, nothing moves. Sometimes the emotional pressure comes from family expectations or assumed family expectations. A lot of homeowners have spent years saving things with the belief that someone in the family will want them later. Maybe the kids will want the dining set. Maybe the grandkids will want the holiday decorations. Maybe someone will want the china, the tools, the furniture, the books, the collections. Sometimes that happens. Often it happens less than expected, and that can create disappointment. But disappointment should not become a storage plan. That is an important point. If family members want certain items, that is great. But it helps to ask clearly and early, not vaguely, not all at once, not during a rushed move. Specific questions work better. Are there certain pieces you care about? Are there family items you would definitely want? Would you like to go through photographs or keepsakes before decisions are made? Is there anything here you know you would actually use in your own home? That creates clarity, and clarity reduces overwhelm because a lot of stress comes from trying to protect every possible future outcome. What if someone wants this later? What if I regret letting this go? What if this turns out to matter more than I thought? Those questions keep people stuck. A better question is, what truly deserves space in the next chapter of life? That question is simpler, more grounded, and much more useful, because downsizing is not about deciding whether the past mattered. It did. The question is what still belongs physically in the life ahead. That is a different decision, and often a clearer one. Another part of overwhelm is perfectionism. Many homeowners quietly assume they need the perfect system before they begin. The right labels, the right boxes, the right plan, the right timing, the right mood, the right amount of help. Usually that is just another form of delay. A good enough system is enough. Keep, donate, give to family, discard. That is already a workable system. It does not need to be more complicated than that. The more complicated the system becomes, the easier it is to stop using it. And once the process feels complicated, overwhelm returns, so simplicity matters, not only in the home, but in the method. It also helps to remember that downsizing is not only about getting rid of things, it is about creating a different kind of daily life. Less to manage, less to clean, less to organize, less to maintain, less to store, less to worry about. That is what makes the work worth it. Because if downsizing feels only like loss, it becomes much harder to continue. But if it begins to feel like making life lighter, the emotional balance changes. Then the project is not only about letting go, it is also about making room for ease, making room for calm, making room for a home that fits better, making room for a next chapter that asks less and gives more back. That is a healthier frame. And it is often what helps older homeowners keep going when the process feels tiring. There is also something important to say about grief. Sometimes the overwhelm is not about the number of belongings at all. Sometimes it is grief in disguise, grief over time passing, grief over children being grown, grief over parents no longer here, grief over the end of a chapter, grief over seeing how much of life has accumulated in physical form. That is real. And when that is part of the process, it helps to name it. Because once grief is acknowledged, it becomes easier to understand why certain boxes feel harder than they should. Not every hard moment is about indecision. Sometimes it is about emotion, and emotion does not need to be fixed immediately. Sometimes it simply needs to be respected. That means it is okay to pause. It is okay to stop after one meaningful decision. It is okay to leave the hardest box for another day. It is okay to let the process unfold gradually. What matters is continuing, not rushing, not forcing, continuing. That is the key, because the biggest barrier to downsizing is usually not the belongings themselves. It is the belief that the project is too big to handle. And the way past that belief is not through pressure, it is through structure. A smaller target, a shorter session, an easier category, a simpler system, a realistic pace. That is how Overwhelm begins to loosen its grip. So, if this is where you are right now, if you are looking around at decades of belongings and feeling buried by the sheer size of the task, here is the takeaway. Do not try to solve the whole house in your head. Do not start with the hardest emotional items. Do not mistake slow progress for failure. And do not wait for the perfect moment to begin. Start smaller than you think you should. Work shorter than you think you need to. Make the next honest decision. Not every decision, because downsizing does not become manageable all at once. It becomes manageable one clear choice at a time, and over time, those choices add up. What feels impossible begins to feel possible. What feels possible begins to feel practical, and what feels practical can eventually become freeing. Thank you for joining this conversation on life after the family home, smart conversations about downsizing, and planning the next chapter. For more guidance, connect with me, Skip Benton. I'm with Coldwell Banker Select Real Estate in Nevada,